Welcome to another podcast of Basement Tales. Our new name is the Real Estate Roadmap to Riches. And so today we got a very, very interesting topic. And what we're going to call it is multiple sellers, multiple problems. And what do we mean by that? Well, let's say you're going to buy a house and it has more than one seller. And sometimes what happens is the sellers might not be properly aligned on what they want to come out of the transaction. So we're going to cover 3 stories where we have deals that are currently going on where there are multiple sellers and they do have multiple problems. And so let's get right into it and let's tell story number 1, and we'll talk about the sellers and what their problems are.
So there's a house in Alexandria that one of the folks that we're working with found.
One of our students.
Okay. Found when he was walking for dollars. And he found a house that was abandoned, and it was quite overgrown, and it wasn't entirely abandoned.
Right.
Because once he got inside it, after he had a deal put on the table with his house, he found that there was, I think it was a blind man living in one of the bedrooms. Is that right?
It definitely was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the house was not in livable condition. So anyone who's seen that house since then can't even believe anyone resided in the house.
We thought it was vacant.
And they've seen it after it was cleaned up. So it was a pretty sad circumstance. And what you had there is the blind guy didn't have any interest in the house that I'm aware of. He was like a relative, an in-law or something like this. And you had a couple of owners. And one owner became the point of contact on selling that house. And put together a deal to sell that house.
And she was local.
And brought it all the way to...
She was in Virginia.
All the way to the closing table. And then they wouldn't allow it to close over really a strange little... reason. And that was they had a... what was it, a bill they had to pay off or something?
Well, there was a sister in California.
No, I hadn't gotten to that yet. But what was the cause where they were saying
what happened so what happened was... There was a title claim, title issue of a credit card where there was a $5,000 balance.
A small balance.
It was a judgment and a $5,000 balance.
So we said, why not keep that in escrow? And they kept saying, no,
well,
you can't put it in escrow.
Well, the judgment had been sold 7 times.
But they still wouldn't put, even when there was enough money to cover it, to put it in escrow, sell the house, take the bulk of the money, and not worry about this thing for a minute. And then they're saying, no, we won't do that. And I'm like, how could that be? It's just not even logical. You want your money, and that you won't put a little, like 1% of it away to pay this bill later on.
And it was a $420,000 transaction.
So it was about 1%, a little less than 1%, a little more than 1%.
Yeah, a little bit more.
So I couldn't understand it, but then the reveal came about 2 weeks into the delays that there's a sister in California who has to sign, and that seems to be driving this particular issue. And how do I know for sure that was? Because when that issue was lifted, they created another artificial issue. They started saying they don't know what to do with the proceeds of the sale. Well, we, working with a purchaser, couldn't care less what the seller does with their proceeds. They could keep it in escrow if there's a dispute over it. Again, they won't sign the documents because they don't know what to do with the proceeds correctly. They don't know how to divvy it up.
Yeah, but did we ever understand the underlying issue? Was it like it was 60-40, 70-30?
We don't know the underlying issue, but we know that the sisters might have been estranged from each other or in a conflict with each other, and that they were represented by counsel, and that the counsel had to be brought in to like leverage the situation shut, because like who wants to leave all this money on the table? It's irrational. Right. But I guess these sisters, even when every other obstacle was removed from the transaction, couldn't work together to just collect a bag of money, collect $500,000.
That's right.
So you can see this comes up
quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so we have another story where a particular lady died and she only had one heir. So now we're not dealing with multiple owners in this case. So she died. She has an heir. We located the heir, and the house is upside down. And what I mean by that is that the money owed to the bank, it was a reverse mortgage. Yeah. The money owed to the bank is more than what the house is worth. Well, this person, being the heir, understands that she's what's called the sole heir, but she wants absolutely nothing to do with the property because she's worried that she'll have to encumber all these debts on her own in her own name, and that certainly is not the case. So we have another issue where,
But she it's just in her head.
and it's just in her head, and so she would get some money out of the transaction, but even though it's upside down and it has to be called what's called a short sale, well, the house is loaded with all kinds of furniture, antiques, artwork. Our buyer is willing to pay this person a considerable amount of money for the belongings in the house via what's called a bill of sale, as long as she'll sell and convey the house that she's a sole heir on. And this person doesn't want to have anything to do with the house, so we're spending all of our time trying to convince her just to sell the house.
That is safe for her to, as an heir, involve herself in the short sale of a property for which she has no responsibility. She thinks if she engages in any way with it, it's going to get stuck to her in some way, the loan or what have you. So,
and that is certainly not
we
the case.
We tried to move her through an attorney to get a better understanding
Right.
of what's going on, so our student can do the acquisition. And this could be a long process.
It's a long process. And so, of course, the first story is where we have two estranged sisters fighting over money, right? Again, owners with two different motivations. We have a sole heir, which is the only person that's
Story 2.
that technically owns the house. Story number 2. And then the third story is, let's talk about the other house in Fairfax, Virginia.
Yeah, the other house in Fairfax, Virginia. It's brought to us by a guy that supportive of our education efforts, and he comes to our meetups and he says, "Hey, I've got a property that my parents own, and they need to market quickly in order to avoid a foreclosure and also to manage their health situation to be in a safe
4 payments behind
to be in a safe situation." We said, "No problem. That's something that we could certainly help you with." Well, when you get over there to the house, you come to find out not only are the parents elderly and live in the house, there are children who are adults who live in the house who are helping care for the parents, and they've even attached one of the children to the deed. So now we have a lot of people with different motivations. The parents want to remain independent. The kids want to support the parent. There's a person on the deed who's not the parents, who's not paying the mortgage. There's a lot of stuff going on with that transaction.
And you got two elderly parents.
You got two elderly. There's no email. You have to, be respectful, of their time and take plenty of time to go through documentation with them and so forth. And in that case, we just involved ourselves as a listing brokerage to assist them with that. But it's a very time-consuming process because they're not all aligned, and the family is certainly not all aligned on like what's going to happen to the best for the parents' best interest to be pursued. Where they're going to live, who's going to live with them, who's going to pay this, who's going to do that. So they're not even on the deed. A bunch of people, and they got a lot of things to say too. So there's a lot of people influencing this very difficult process.
Right. So there's three big issues with this. Number one is they're certainly not all aligned in the fact that they even want to sell the house.
Sure.
The only reason
because
why
is financial distress.
Right. It's a financial distress. That's why they have to sell the house.
Mm-hmm.
Further from that is there's another issue in that they're not all aligned on where they want to live.
Yeah, even the people who have to be with the folks that are there.
That's right. They're not all aligned in that. And so you're taking folks that are going to move from a 7,000 or 8,000 square foot house, and now you're going to have to put them into a rental.
One level.
And so, no, maybe not, but they're still not aligned on what type of house they want to rent. They're not all aligned that they even want to rent. The father, who's elderly, thinks he's going to buy another house. So we have ourselves, what do we even call this? We call this a mess.
That's a mess.
And a time trap.
Yeah.
Whatever else you want to call it. So
yeah. And so we'll have a follow-up on that one because that one's in the final sale process right now.
Yeah, but the thing that's not in the process is that where are they going to go?
Yeah.
And who is going to sign?
Well,
we've got
a good agent. We've got a good agent working on that now. So
not name me and not name Sam.
That's an interesting thing I hadn't thought about, including with some of these distress purchases and wholesaling and all that, is that a lot of times you're dealing with older people that the kids may want to move into a nursing home arrangement. And I've got a family relative, let's say, who is very spry and moves around quite well, but really is not safe in terms of mental acuity to handle situations and wants to do all the housework, and they at least need help. But the reality is they really should be moving towards, a retirement home, but
Right.
they would never, these people would never sign anything that suggested that they would have to do that. It's going to be the only thing that's going to happen there, at least the bills are paid, is eventually the person's going to fall and get
Yeah,
hurt,
that's very
and
common.
there's going to be legal stuff.
Yeah.
It's really sad, which
Yeah.
is another, I mean, that's not the topic of our real estate stuff, but try to take care of those issues and plan when people are younger,
Yeah.
and would be more likely to say, okay, I get it. I may reach a point I don't know what I'm doing. And so here's the plan I've written out, whatever it may
Yeah.
be.
That's the
So,
seller
how
and
do
you.
get
That's the
by
seller and you getting aligned.
Well, no, I think that's a really good suggestion. And that brings me to another story, too, along the same lines, where, Ed, you brought the fact that you need to contact a daughter, a son, a child to further help out with the situation. Well, we have another deal where one of our students did. She bought a pre-foreclosure. And so, when you get a pre-foreclosure, you got the ownership, but then you got to get possession. Well, she had the possession worked out because it was a voluntary sale and he did a post-settlement occupancy agreement, and this person was supposed to be out on a certain date. Well, the certain date came up. Person wouldn't sign a lease. He wouldn't move from a 3-level townhouse into a 1-level, 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. He refused to sign a lease. And remember, he had banged up credit. And so this person did a job to find a private owner that would take 6 months to 12 months in prepaid lease. So what ended up happening is we were like, okay, well, the only way to resolve this issue is, luckily we knew not only did he have an ex-wife, but he also had a sister that was in the area. So we contacted, or she, not me, the owner of the house, who was one of our students, not only contacted the ex-wife was like, oh, hell no, I'm not allowing him to move back in with me, blah, blah, blah. And then we contacted the sister. The sister lived in the same house where this particular gentleman grew up in, had a couple of bedrooms freed up. So that's exactly where he moved in. He moved back in with his sister in the house that he grew up in. And so luckily for our student, she got possession of the house.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of seller motivation and seller concerns when you're dealing with distressed real estate.
Yeah, so just remember, when you're buying these properties from sellers that have different motivations and different needs, not only do you got to get the ownership straight, but you've also got to get the possession straight. So you got to worry about two different things.
Yeah.
And the relationships. I mean, this is a good example of one where, it'd be easy to throw your hands up on some of these situations. And it sounds like you're stepping into family situations
for sure.
and all sorts of personal stuff. And that's what you're really trying to solve. They all may be in some fashion happy to sell the property, but they don't know how to move on to wherever it might be and whatever's in somebody's best interests. And obviously you can't force somebody, and you need to be sure maybe somebody has power of attorney who can deal with it. But and we had in another podcast, we talked about the problem of a squatter. If you have something where you're going to do a rent back, or, we'll let you stay for 3 or 6 months after the closing, you better be darn sure that person actually is going to leave, because you don't have to evict them. And as we talked about in DC, that's a really long process.
Yeah. And you're trying to solve these problems. You're not just trying to shove them off, because this is where you're adding value for the deal that you're getting.
Yeah. Yep. And so let's just go around the table one time and let's just kind of give our final statements, and let's just end this.
Let's end it. All right. Well, that's how it is actually when you're doing one of these real estate transactions. You're trying to bring the people to an end of their occupation of one property, and get them into a new start. And so I think that is a good call to end it. Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like I'm making a closing argument in a death penalty case after that intro. Well, and I guess that's the point, is we want a happy resolution of these things. This is not and I probably emphasize this even too much, but not as a lawyer, it just as being a good person and an ethical person. We want to solve these problems. We don't want to add to their problems.
Yeah,
And I know you guys sometimes have helped arrange alternate living for people to be able
sure.
to rent a place. For they don't have the money. They're fine to go, but they don't have the $3,000 first month deposit, last month, all the things that they need or more with bad credit. And maybe that's where you can pay them some money to get into that other place. Well, now that solves your occupancy problem. And boy, I feel like I'm a lawyer in real life. I feel like you have to be a psychiatrist on some of these
There you
things.
go.
That's out of my specialty. But I guess it also is what makes it interesting for all of us. Every one of these things is just totally different and totally different desires and interests and people.
Yep.
And it's fun to get that resolution where hopefully everybody's, feels like it's been a good deal, good resolution.
Yeah, and so for me, the last thing I'll talk about a little bit is that, we told a story about a house that's owned by 3 people, house that's owned by 2 people, and then a house where it's really owned by 1 person. And so part of the transaction is going to have to understand these differences between the owners as well as their motivation. And a lot of times it's not simple, but just as long as you guys out there understand and know, you got to know who the owners are and you got to understand what their motivations are before you can really conduct a successful transaction. So until next time, guys, keep subscribing, tell your friends, and I hope you like it.